James sat alone in the kitchen, the early morning sunlight spilling over the table, painting stripes across his coffee cup. He stared at it, unseeing, the warmth of the ceramic failing to reach the cold ache in his chest. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that made each creak of the floorboards sound louder than it had any right to dot. Sarah was gone. She had left the night before without a fight, without a dramatic farewell. Just a small, polite note on the counter and the hollow sound of the front door closing behind her. James had expected anger, confusion, maybe tears, but none of that had come. She had slipped away like a shadow, leaving him behind with nothing but silence and questions. He didn't know how to answer. He rubbed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. How could someone who shared your life, your dreams, your ordinary every day just disappear? He replayed every conversation, every argument, every shared smile, searching for a clue. There had to be one. Maybe it was a word he said, a promise he broke, or maybe it was just life changing too quickly for him to keep up. The house smelled faintly of Sarah her shampoo, the faint trace of her perfume on the pillow she left behind. It was comforting and unbearable all at once. James leaned his head back, letting the memories wash over him. He remembered Saturday mornings when Sarah would brew coffee just the way he liked it, soft music playing in the background, their small routine of laughter over burnt toast. He missed it fiercely, even as he tried to convince himself he should move on. And yet, the emptiness was profound. It wasn't just her absence. It was the sudden void of shared life, the missing piece of laughter, of chatter, of warmth that had always been there. James felt the loneliness settling over him like a heavy blanket, the kind that made movement feel exhausting, and thought that maybe he had never truly known what being alone could feel like. His phone buzzed on the counter, startling him. He picked it up slowly, hoping for some message from Sarah, some sign that this wasn't permanent. But it wasn't her. It was a reminder for a dentist appointment he had forgotten. A notification from the grocery store about a delayed delivery. Ordinary things. Mundane things. Things that seemed meaningless when compared to this sudden absence of someone who used to fill every corner of your world. He sighed and set the phone down. He felt aimless, unsure of what to do first. Should he clean? Try to distract himself with work? Or maybe just sit and let the silence swallow him whole? He chose the latter for now. Then the doorbell rang. James froze, a small jolt of anticipation or dread running through him. Who could it be? The neighbors were kind, but they didn't usually visit unannounced. And Sarah? No, she wouldn't come back yet. Not like this. He walked slowly to the door, each step heavier than the last, as if the weight of the morning's emptiness pressed down on him. When he opened it, he froze. Standing on the porch, slightly damp from the morning dew, was Eleanor, Sarah's mother. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held a depth of concern that made James's chest tighten. She held a small basket of fruit in her hands, and for a moment, James wasn't sure if she was real or a figment of his exhausted imagination. James, Eleanor said softly, her voice warm but measured. I thought, maybe I should come. James blinked, unsure how to respond. Why was she here? Did she know something he didn't? Did Sarah ask her to come? He felt a strange mixture of relief and confusion, an unspoken hope that perhaps this visit would change everything. Eleanor stepped in slowly, brushing past the awkward tension that hung in the air. She carried no judgment, no reproach, only a quiet, unwavering presence that seemed to fill the emptiness in the room. She set the basket on the counter and smiled gently. I know this isn't easy, she said. I thought, maybe I could help. Just by being here. James felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to ask her how, exactly, she planned to help, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he nodded, feeling a strange sense of comfort at her presence. She wasn't Sarah. She couldn't replace her. But maybe, just maybe, she could help him navigate the days ahead, the long, lonely stretch of hours without the woman he loved. And as he stood there, looking at Eleanor, James realized something that surprised him. He wasn't entirely alone. Not yet. Something had shifted just a little. And in that quiet morning light, with the house still filled with the ghost of Sarah's laughter, James allowed himself a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, things weren't over. The first few days with Eleanor in the house were quiet, almost tentative. She didn't demand attention, didn't push into James's life. She simply existed in the space that had felt so empty before. And yet, her presence carried an unspoken weight, a gentle comfort that made the silence more bearable. One afternoon, Eleanor suggested they sort through some of Sarah's old belongings, things she had left behind in a rush. James hesitated at first. Looking at her childhood photos, letters, and keepsakes was painful. Each item was a reminder of the life he and Sarah had shared, of all the moments he now missed. But Eleanor didn't rush him. She simply handed him an old photograph of Sarah as a child, sitting in a sunlit park, her small hands clumsily trying to hold on to an ice cream cone that was already melting. She loved summer days, Eleanor said softly. Even when she got messy, even when it didn't go right. She would laugh, and somehow everything felt lighter. James smiled faintly, feeling the ache in his chest soften just a little. I remember that, he murmured. He could almost hear Sarah's laughter echoing through the kitchen. Bright and careless. You've always been good to her, Eleanor continued. Even when you didn't see it, she noticed. She loved the little things you did, the way you'd make her coffee, just the way she liked it. The silly notes you'd leave in her lunchbox. She talked about you, more than you knew. James's throat tightened. He hadn't realized how much Sarah had held on to those small moments, the everyday acts of care. They were the quiet threads that had woven them together, unnoticed but strong. Now, with her gone, he understood just how much those simple gestures had mattered as they continued looking through the box. Eleanor shared stories from Sarah's childhood, tales of her first day at school, her stubborn determination to climb the tallest tree in the yard, and the afternoons she spent reading by the window. Each story was filled with warmth. And James found himself laughing quietly at memories he had never known. I didn't know this about her, he admitted. I mean, I knew some things, but there's so much I never saw. Eleanor nodded. That's what happens sometimes. You live with someone, you share a life, but there's always a part of them that remains just beyond reach. Sometimes that distance isn't about a lack of love, it's just the way people are. James paused, reflecting on her words. He thought about the times he had been frustrated with Sarah. The arguments that had seemed so big in the moment but now felt small and almost foolish. He realized that some of the distance between them had been unintentional, the result of everyday life rather than a lack of care, for the first time. He also noticed Eleanor herself, not just as Sarah's mother, but as a person. There was a gentleness in the way she spoke, a patience that seemed endless, and a quiet strength that grounded the room. She didn't offer solutions, didn't lecture or impose. She simply remembered and shared, letting the past build a bridge between them. You've always cared about her. James, Eleanor said quietly, almost as if reading his thoughts. And she's always cared about you. That's why this hurts so much, because it matters. James nodded, his eyes lingering on the photograph again. He felt a deep, nostalgic ache, a longing for moments that had passed but were still alive in memory. He realized that love wasn't just about presence, it was about attention, about noticing the little things that made life meaningful. And he had loved Sarah deeply. Even if he hadn't understood every corner of her heart, there was a pause. A shared silence that was neither awkward nor heavy. It felt natural, almost comforting. Eleanor's presence reminded him that connection could exist even in absence, that the threads of care and memory were never truly lost. You remind me a lot of her, Eleanor said softly, almost as if to herself. James looked up, startled, unsure how to respond. She met his gaze with a quiet honesty. Not in the ways you think, her laughter, maybe, or the way she could be stubborn and kind at the same time. But your heart, it's open. That's rare. James felt warmth rising in his chest. There was no confusion, no expectation, just a shared recognition of honesty and care. He realized that Eleanor wasn't here to replace Sarah, nor was she here to intrude. She was here to help him remember, to help him feel the depth of the bond he had with his wife, and to remind him that love could be expressed in many ways through memories, through stories, through silent understanding. That evening, as Eleanor left the kitchen to prepare tea, James lingered over the photographs and letters. He thought about Sarah, about all the moments they had shared, and about the ways he had loved her without fully understanding her. And yet, he also felt a quiet gratitude for Eleanor's presence, gentle, steady reminder that the world wasn't entirely empty. That connection could exist even in the middle of heartbreak. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting golden light across the room, James realized that the past wasn't gone. It lived in these stories, these shared memories, and in the quiet moments between them. And Ma. James had started to feel a sense of routine again, a quiet rhythm in the house that was both comforting and strange. Eleanor's presence was no longer a surprise, but a gentle constant. Like the way sunlight touched the kitchen counter each morning. And yet, each day brought subtle reminders of what had changed, what might still change. It was a Thursday afternoon when the twist arrived, not as a grand event, but in the simplest, most unexpected way. James was rearranging the living room, trying to make the space feel more like home, when he dropped a stack of old letters Sarah had written to him over the years. They tumbled to the floor in a neat, scattered heap. Eleanor, who had been reading by the window, looked up. "Careful," she said softly, moving to help him gather them. As their hands brushed over the letters, James felt a strange pulse of electricity, not romantic. Not in the way that would ever be inappropriate, but a reminder of the closeness humans could feel when they shared vulnerability. It was fleeting, but it made him pause, looking up at Eleanor with a question he didn't yet voice. One letter caught his eye. It was from a time when he and Sarah had been arguing over something trivial, something neither of them remembered now. But the words inside were full of honesty, longing, and hope. Sarah had written about how much she valued his patience even when she was frustrated. She had written about dreaming of a future together, small details like morning coffee on weekends and the comfort of his presence. James felt his chest tighten. He read the letter aloud, almost unconsciously, his voice soft but steady. Eleanor's eyes were on him, attentive and calm, and for a moment, the room was suspended in time, just the two of them, surrounded by memories, connected by the shared experience of loving Sarah. "You remember this?" Eleanor asked quietly, her voice almost a whisper. James nodded. "I do. I think I needed to read it again to remember." She smiled faintly, but there was a wistful sadness beneath it. Sometimes fate has a way of bringing the past and present together, not to hurt us, but to remind us what matters. Her words lingered, and James realized that what had happened between them, this growing closeness, wasn't planned. It wasn't forced. It was subtle, like the way the wind moves leaves without warning, shifting the light in the room, or the way a familiar song suddenly evokes a flood of memories. That evening, Eleanor suggested they make dinner together. The kitchen was small, warm, and filled with the aroma of simmering vegetables. They laughed quietly over spilled sauce and forgotten ingredients. And James felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in months. "Funny," Eleanor said, stirring the pot, "how life keeps pushing us toward people who help us heal." James didn't reply immediately. He thought about the emptiness he had felt when Sarah left, about the quiet nights and the unanswered questions. And yet, here he was, sharing a simple moment with Eleanor, feeling a connection that was both comforting and settlingly familiar. Not because of romance, but because of understanding, care, and mutual presence. After dinner, they sat on the porch, the evening air crisp and calm. James picked up one of the letters again, reading a passage aloud. Eleanor listened, occasionally nodding, sometimes smiling at the memory it evoked. And in those moments, James began to notice how much he had come to rely on her, not just for comfort, but for clarity, for companionship, for a sense that someone saw him for who he truly was. A sudden gust of wind blew through the porch, carrying the scent of rain and freshly cut grass. James shivered slightly, and Eleanor handed him a light blanket from the chair beside her. Their fingers touched briefly as he took it, and the contact was brief, innocent, yet it carried a weight neither of them ignored. "I never thought I'd feel normal again," James admitted softly, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun had dipped. Just out of view, Eleanor's hand rested lightly on the arm of his chair. Sometimes normal comes quietly, when we least expect it. Not as a replacement for what we've lost, but as a way to keep moving forward. James felt an unexpected warmth in his chest, a flicker of hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in months. The emptiness of the house seemed smaller now, filled not only with memories of Sarah, but also with the quiet, steady presence of Eleanor. That night, as Eleanor left for her room, James sat alone for a while, reflecting on the day. He realized that the small coincidences, the letters, the shared moments, the quiet laughter had reignited something within him. Not desire, not longing in the physical sense, but a deeper sense of connection, a recognition of shared humanity and empathy. It was a gentle reminder that life didn't always follow the plans we made, that love and care could appear unexpectedly, and that even in heartbreak, the heart could find ways to heal and reach out. And as he turned off the lights and lay in the quiet of his room, James felt a truth settle softly within him. Life had a way of surprising us, bringing people together in ways we never anticipated, and sometimes those surprises were exactly what we needed to begin again. For the first time in weeks, he slept not with the ache of loss alone, but with a quiet sense that the present could hold unexpected gifts, and that tomorrow might bring moments he never thought possible. The days following Eleanor's arrival had settled into a quiet rhythm, yet beneath the calm, an unspoken tension lingered. It wasn't dramatic or loud, but it existed in the space between glances, in the pauses between words, in the small hesitations that neither James nor Eleanor dared to voice. James found himself noticing things he hadn't before. The way Eleanor's hand lingered a moment too long on a cup of tea, the way her eyes softened when she looked at him, the small smile that appeared when they shared a memory of Sarah. There was warmth there, a gentle connection that made his chest ache with something he couldn't name. Longing for her. In a romantic way, but a longing for closeness, for understanding, for a sense of comfort he hadn't felt in months. Eleanor, too, was quietly aware. She noticed the way James seemed smaller when he carried the weight of his grief, the way his la frere, as it was, shook slightly with vulnerability. She had always known him through Sarah's stories, through the edges of the person she loved. Now, seeing him in his own grief, in his own quiet struggle, she felt an unfamiliar pull of care and concern. She wanted to comfort him, to ease the ache in his eyes. But she knew some emotions weren't hers to claim. One evening, James was clearing the dining table after dinner, and Eleanor appeared behind him, holding a small tray of tea. "I thought you might need this," she said softly. He turned to her with a tired smile. "I do, actually. Thank you." For a long moment, they stood there in silence, their hands brushing as he took the cup from her. The touch was brief, accidental, yet it sent a ripple through both of them. Neither spoke, yet both felt the weight of what was not said. "I keep thinking about how quickly life changes," James said finally, almost to himself. "One day, everything feels normal, and the next, it's gone." Eleanor nodded, her eyes following him as he settled into the chair. "Loss has a way of making us notice things we never realized mattered," she said quietly. "Sometimes it's the small things, the things that don't seem important at first." James looked down at the tea, feeling the warmth seep into his hands. "I keep thinking about what I should have said, what I should have done differently. I wonder if it would have made a difference." Eleanor's voice was gentle, patient. "We all wonder that. But some things aren't about what we did wrong. Some things just happen, and all we can do is carry them forward and learn from them." He glanced up at her, and their eyes met. There was a soft understanding there, a quiet acknowledgement of shared experience. Both of them had feelings. They couldn't name emotions that were too tangled to untangle completely. They longed for connection, for comfort, for a sense of being understood. Yet they hesitated, afraid that speaking aloud might change the delicate balance they had found. The next afternoon, small coincidence brought the unspoken tension to the surface. James was rearranging books on a shelf when he dropped one, and Eleanor bent down to pick it up at the same time. Their hands met again, lingering just a moment longer than necessary. James laughed softly. Unpracticed sound. I keep dropping things today, he said, trying to mask the flutter of awareness that had risen in his chest. Eleanor's eyes softened, and she smiled faintly. Maybe it's not the things dropping, James. Maybe it's just us noticing each other more. He blinked, uncertain if he had heard her correctly, but the sincerity in her voice left no room for doubt. There was something between them, subtle but undeniable, a connection forged through grief, understanding, and quiet companionship. As the evening fell, we sat together on the porch, listening to the soft hum of the neighborhood settling into night. Words felt heavy, almost unnecessary, but the silence was alive with meaning. James wanted to say something, anything, that could bridge the gap between them, yet he hesitated. Eleanor felt the same. They were both aware of the closeness, the care, the warmth, yet both feared that naming it might disrupt the fragile equilibrium they had found. Finally, James spoke, his voice low but steady. I don't know how to explain it. But being here with you, it makes the emptiness less heavy. It's not about replacing anything, it's just something I need right now. Eleanor reached over and placed her hand lightly on his, a gesture of reassurance and The house was unusually quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that seemed to press against James's chest. He had been pacing the living room, restless, thinking about Eleanor, thinking about Sarah, and thinking about all the unspoken words that had been building between them. For weeks, the silence had been both a comfort and a weight, a fragile balance that neither wanted to disturb. But today, that balance could no longer hold. Eleanor entered the room carrying a stack of folded laundry, her footsteps soft on the wooden floor. She looked up and caught James's gaze. There was something in the way he held his hands, the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes didn't quite meet hers, that made her pause. She set the laundry basket down carefully. James, you've been quiet all morning, she said gently. Is something on your mind? He swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat. For the first time, he realized he could no longer contain the thoughts and feelings that had been building inside him. Not the kind that were reckless or inappropriate, but the kind that were honest, tender, and necessary. I need to say something, he began, his voice low but steady. Something I should have said a long time ago, but I didn't know how. Eleanor stepped closer, her expression open, patient, encouraging without pressuring him. Whatever it is, you can tell me. James took a deep breath. When Sarah left, I felt like my world collapsed. I felt lost. I thought I could manage, but the emptiness, well, it was unbearable. And then you came. You didn't try to fix it. You didn't judge me. You just showed up. And I realized that I wasn't alone. I wasn't completely alone. Eleanor's eyes softened, and she reached out to touch his arm lightly. James. He shook his head slightly, forcing himself to continue. It's not about replacing anyone. It's not about changing the past. It's about the present. You've been here for me in ways I didn't even know I needed. You reminded me that it's possible to feel again, to care again, even when my heart still hurts. Eleanor's hand lingered on his arm, a simple gesture of connection, understanding, and shared emotion. James, I felt it too, she admitted quietly. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to overstep. But seeing you like this, seeing your grief, your courage, your kindness, it's impossible not to feel it. And I think we both know there's something here, something real, even if it's complicated. James let the words sink in. There was relief in hearing her speak the truth aloud, a clarity that had been missing for weeks. The unspoken tension between them, the hesitations, the fleeting touches, and shared glances, it was all acknowledged now. It didn't erase the past. It didn't undo the absence of Sarah or the heartbreak that lingered. But it gave them both permission to recognize the bond that had quietly formed. They sat down together, side by side, the afternoon light spilling through the windows, warming the room. Neither of them spoke for a few minutes, letting the silence carry the weight of their emotions. It was a different kind of silence, now one filled with honesty and understanding, rather than uncertainty and fear. "I've been afraid," James admitted, finally. "Afraid that feeling anything, would be wrong. Afraid that I was betraying Sarah by finding comfort in someone else's presence. But I've realized it's not betrayal. It's just life moving forward. And I'm grateful for it. Grateful for you." Eleanor's eyes glistened, but she smiled softly. "James, you've never betrayed anyone. You've loved and you've lost, and you've allowed yourself to feel. That takes courage. And the fact that we've found each other in this, it doesn't diminish the past. It just makes the present more meaningful." James nodded, a sense of peace settling over him for the first time in weeks. It wasn't complete resolution. He still missed Sarah deeply. And he knew she would always be part of his heart, but the weight of unspoken emotions had lifted. Finally, they could acknowledge what had been there all along: care. Connection, understanding, and an emotional intimacy built on trust and shared vulnerability. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, carrying the faint scent of early spring. Inside, James and Eleanor sat together, letting the quiet settle over them like a gentle blanket. They didn't need grand gestures, dramatic speeches, or perfect timing. They just needed honesty, presence, and a shared understanding that some bonds are formed not in moments of perfection, but in the quiet, challenging moments of life. "Thank you," James said softly, breaking the silence. "For showing up, for staying, for reminding me that even after loss, life can still hold something good." Eleanor nodded, squeezing his hand lightly. "And thank you, James, for trusting me, for allowing me to be part of your life, even when it wasn't easy. That's all I've ever wanted, to be here when you needed someone." For the first time, James felt the full weight of gratitude, understanding, and quiet joy. The emotional turning point had arrived. Not through grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but through honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to speak what had long remained unspoken. And in that moment, both of them knew that life, though unpredictable and sometimes painful, had a way of bringing people together in exactly the ways they needed most. The path ahead wasn't fully clear, and the future held uncertainty, but the truth had been spoken. And speaking, it had changed everything. The morning light filtered softly through the living room windows, casting a warm glow over the house that had felt heavy with silence just weeks ago. James sat at the kitchen table, cradling his cup of coffee, and allowed himself a deep, steadying breath. The tension that had weighed on him for so long, the uncertainty, the heartbreak, the unspoken emotions, felt lighter now. Eleanor entered the room quietly, carrying a small plate of pastries. Her presence no longer startled him. It had become a steady rhythm in his life, a comforting and reliable part of the days that had seemed endless and lonely. She set the plate down, smiling gently. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm, warm. "I made your favorite." James smiled, feeling an unfamiliar ease in his chest. "Thank you. It smells wonderful." For a few moments they sat together in companionable silence, the soft clinking of spoons against cups filling the room. They didn't need words to acknowledge the connection that had grown between them, one built on trust, care, and shared memories. It was not a replacement for the past, nor was it a solution to heartbreak. It was something quiet and steady, a reminder that life could still hold beauty even after loss. Later that day, Sarah returned. The sound of her familiar voice at the front door brought a flood of emotions, relief, apprehension, and hope all mixed together. James met her at the door, and for a long moment they just looked at each other, the weight of absence and longing hanging in the air. I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. I didn't mean to leave things the way I did. I just needed space. James nodded. I understand. And I'm glad you're home. Eleanor watched from the side, her expression gentle and knowing. She had been part of the journey through heartbreak, and now she witnessed the fragile steps toward reconciliation. There were tears, apologies, and long conversations. But there was also understanding, patience, and the quiet realization that some bonds, though stretched, were never broken. Over the next few days, the house filled again with laughter and conversation. Small routines, return morning coffee, shared meals, quiet evenings on the porch. But now they existed alongside a new layer of connection and understanding. James noticed how Sarah and Eleanor interacted, how their shared love and concern had created a supportive network that made the house feel fuller and more alive. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, James felt a deep sense of clarity. The events of the past weeks, the heartbreak, the unspoken emotions, the quiet presence of Eleanor had taught him something profound. Life was unpredictable. Love was multifaceted, and healing often came in forms that were unexpected but meaningful. Sarah leaned against his shoulder briefly, a small gesture of reconciliation and trust. Eleanor sat beside them, her presence calm and steady. A reminder that care and compassion could bridge even the most difficult moments. James realized that the love he felt wasn't divided, had expanded. It encompassed family, friendship, and the quiet bonds that had helped him navigate his grief. Later, as Eleanor prepared to leave for the night, she turned to James. "You've grown so much through all of this," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." James felt a lump in his throat, not from sadness, but from gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted. "Thank you for everything. For showing up, for staying, for reminding me that life doesn't end with heartbreak." Eleanor smiled, the kind of smile that carried warmth, understanding, and a quiet assurance. "Sometimes showing up is all it takes," she said. "The rest comes in time." As she left, James watched her go, feeling a sense of closure that was peaceful and complete. There was no confusion, no lingering doubt. The past had shaped him, the present had guided him, and the future, though unknown, felt full of promise. That night, James and Sarah sat together on the porch, wrapped in the calm of the evening. They spoke quietly, not needing to fill every moment with words. The silence between them was comfortable, a shared understanding that they had weathered a storm and emerged stronger. James realized that love, in all its forms, was resilient. It could survive absence, endure misunderstanding,